My brother threw the biggest party of his life, and I found out on Instagram. I remember staring at my phone that Tuesday evening, my fingers frozen mid-screen. There it was, a perfectly filtered photo of my cousin holding up 2 dresses, captioned, "Which one should I wear to Eric and Melissa's engagement party this weekend?" I had to read it 3 times. My brother, the kid who used to sneak Pop-Tarts into my backpack and call me his hero, was throwing a huge engagement party, and I wasn't even considered. Eric and I grew up in Austin. With our parents constantly working or wrapped up in charity galas, we had no one but each other. I taught him how to ride a bike, defended him against middle school bullies, and listened to him talk about Star Wars for hours when no one else cared. When I moved to Seattle for my design job, we promised we'd never let distance change us. For a while, we didn't. We had late-night FaceTime calls, swapped playlists, and counted down the days to our holiday reunions. Then Eric met Melissa. She was polished, polite, the kind of person who always looked like she was posing for a Christmas card. She asked about my life in Seattle, but never really listened, her eyes glazing over when I talked about my art or the weird indie bands I loved. Slowly, Eric started changing. His calls turned into short, distracted check-ins. Texts that used to be paragraphs became curt, one-word replies. When I'd visit home, Melissa would sit next to him, her hand locked onto his arm like a warning sign. Any time I brought up our childhood or tried to share an old joke, she'd cut in, change the subject, or give me that tight, polite smile that said, "You don't belong here anymore." I tried to rationalize it. I told myself he was busy, building a life, making space for someone new. But every short reply, every ignored invitation felt like a new crack running down the wall between us. And now, this party, the ultimate betrayal. Public proof that I had been officially erased. No explanation, no awkward, "Sorry, we had to cut the list." Just a cold, gleaming photo, announcing my replacement to the world. I didn't cry. I didn't beg for an invite. I just sat there, phone in hand, breathing slow. Because he had no idea what I was about to do next. After that night, I tried to tell myself I was overreacting. Maybe they really did have to keep the guest list small. Maybe Melissa's parents wanted an intimate event. But no matter how many excuses I whispered to myself in the dark, I couldn't shake the image of my brother, the same kid who once begged me to build Lego spaceships with him until 2 a.m., smiling in photos at a party I was never meant to see. Days passed, and the more I thought about it, the clearer it all became. This wasn't just an oversight. It was deliberate, a message. And it wasn't only Melissa's doing. Eric let it happen. He watched me fade from his life piece by piece and never stopped it. It started with the phone calls. He'd answer with a flat, "Hey," and when I'd launch into a funny story from work or tell him about the mural I was painting downtown, he'd respond with, "Cool," then quickly hang up. The messages turned into single-word replies. The visits home became rushed dinners with him glancing at his watch, Melissa always at his side, her hand gripping his wrist like a leash. On Christmas, I showed up with a framed sketch I'd made of us as kids, him in his Batman pajamas, me in my favourite red sweater, laughing. I handed it to him, proud, thinking maybe it would thaw something. He barely looked at it before passing it to Melissa, who set it on a side table like it was an Amazon package she didn't order. That night, while we sat around the living room, Melissa made small remarks that stung deeper than any outright insult. When I mentioned a new promotion at my agency, she smirked and said, "Must be nice not having to worry about real family responsibilities." Eric laughed. A small, empty laugh, but it echoed louder than any argument. I didn't sleep at all that night. I lay on the guest bed, staring at the ceiling fan turning slowly above me. Every rotation felt like a clock ticking down, pushing me closer to a line I knew I couldn't step back from once crossed. I thought about all the times I'd put him first, the art competitions I skipped to help him study, The nights I cooked dinner because Mum was too tired and Dad was buried in case files. All those invisible sacrifices. Dismissed. Forgotten. That moment on Instagram wasn't just a photo. It was the final crack in a wall that had been splintering for years. I drove back to Seattle with that same sketch he'd tossed aside sitting in my passenger seat. Somewhere on I-5, somewhere between the endless stretches of pines and grey sky, something shifted inside me. The pain turned into something sharper, steadier. Resolve. When I got home, I didn't collapse into bed or call a friend to vent. Instead, I poured myself a glass of water, set my phone on silent, and pulled out my sketchbooks. Page after page of our shared childhood. Water balloon fights, bike rides at sunset, his 7th birthday cake. Each one a memory I'd held onto alone. I gathered them into a box, sealed it shut, and pushed it deep into my closet. I needed space in my mind. I needed to see him and them for what they had become, not what I wished they were. For days I watched, from afar, quietly. Melissa posted endless updates, menu tastings, flower arrangements, blessed family moments. Eric rarely appeared, but when he did, his eyes looked vacant, like he was posing in someone else's story. I started gathering details. Who was attending, what time, where. I took screenshots of every tag, every location pin. I noted every comment, from relatives congratulating them, gushing over how complete the family looked. I didn't lash out. Not yet. On the outside, I remained the same sister who posted pictures of my art, the one who sent polite birthday texts. Inside, though, I was stitching together every detail, every oversight, every small cruelty. Then came the final push. A text from my dad. "Hey, Lauren. We're sorry you can't make it to Eric's engagement party. Maybe you can visit another time." I reread it a dozen times. Sorry I can't make it? As if I had chosen not to go. As if my absence was voluntary. That's when I knew. They were rewriting the narrative to protect themselves, painting me as the distant, cold sibling who didn't care enough to show up. I didn't reply. I didn't call. I didn't send angry paragraphs or dramatic voice notes. Instead, I started planning. I booked a ski trip to Whistler with 2 colleagues from my agency, Dana and Will. It wasn't a spontaneous escape, it was a statement. While they toasted champagne in a country club ballroom, I would be carving through snow beneath a sky so blue it would hurt to look at. I chose the red ski jacket Eric bought me years ago. It wasn't sentimentality, it was strategy. He had given it to me after I landed my first big mural contract. "For my brave sister," he'd written on the card back then. I packed it carefully, zipping it up as though closing a chapter. During the days leading up to the party, I pretended everything was fine. I even liked some of Melissa's posts. I left a on a throwback photo. From the outside, I looked like the supportive sister, the harmless artist too busy to attend a family event. But inside, each detail was a chess piece sliding silently into place. I didn't scream. I didn't confront anyone in advance. I just waited. On the day of their big party, I stood at the top of the mountain in Whistler, the cold air slicing across my cheeks, my lungs burning in that beautiful, cleansing way. Dana pulled out her phone and said, "You need a photo. Right now, this is it." She snapped dozens of shots. Me standing proud, the red jacket bold against endless snow and sky. I picked the best one. My face relaxed but fierce, the world stretching out behind me. I uploaded it to Instagram with one simple caption. Sometimes the family you choose shows up when your own does. Then I put my phone back in my pocket and strapped on my helmet. I didn't check the likes, didn't scroll the comments, because in that moment I was no longer the sister waiting for scraps of love at a crowded dinner table. I was free. He thought he broke me. What he didn't know was I was just getting started. After I posted that photo in Whistler, I knew the storm would come, but what they didn't know was I had already braced for it. Hours after my run down the mountain, I finally turned on my phone. Notifications exploded. Missed calls from Eric, furious texts from my dad, passive-aggressive messages from relatives. Melissa's name kept popping up too, though she never dared to message me directly. While they were busy spinning in their echo chamber, I calmly sipped my hot chocolate by the fire, watching snow drift past the big lodge windows. Back home in Seattle, I started putting the second phase into motion. I had kept every text, every ignored invite, every short, dismissive reply. Screenshots of Melissa's comments, all the passive digs, the family group chats that conveniently left me out. I compiled them into a neat folder on my desktop, labelled Truth. I knew Eric and Melissa cared about image more than anything. Their social circle back in Austin was obsessed with appearances, curated brunches, charity fundraisers, perfect couple posts. I also knew Eric's new job at a large engineering firm depended heavily on his public persona, the reliable, family-oriented golden boy. I took a breath and sent an email to my extended family, using the address list they'd so kindly left on an old invitation from years ago. In that email, I attached screenshots, not in a vengeful tone, but calmly explaining that I had not been invited to the engagement party. No emotional outbursts, no insults, just pure, undeniable evidence. I ended it with, I wish Eric and Melissa the best, but I thought it was important everyone knew the truth behind my absence. Then I closed my laptop and went for a walk along the waterfront. The air smelled like salt and wet pine, and for the first time in years I felt weightless. When I came home, my inbox was on fire. Cousins who had posted about the party deleted their photos. An aunt who had always favoured Eric wrote me a long apology email telling me she had no idea. Even my grandmother, who hadn't texted me in 2 years, sent a trembling, simple line, "I'm so sorry, Lauren." Meanwhile, Eric tried calling again and again. When I finally answered, his voice was already breaking. "You've blindsided us," he sputtered. "Melissa's parents are humiliated. I could lose my job. Why would you do this?" I listened without interrupting. Finally, I said, "I didn't do anything, Eric. You did. You wrote me out of your life. I just handed everyone the pen you used." Silence. Then a strangled, "It wasn't supposed to be like this." "Exactly," I said softly. "But you let her rewrite our story. You let her decide who I was, and you stood there, quiet." His breathing turned shallow, the line filled with a kind of desperation I hadn't heard since we were kids, when he used to call me from a friend's sleepover because he felt alone. "Lauren, please, can't we fix this?" he finally choked out. "No," I said, my voice steady. "I'm done being the one who fixes everything." Melissa never called, but I knew from other relatives that she had a meltdown. Her carefully constructed image cracked. Some of her friends unfollowed her after seeing the truth. Sponsors for her local charity events started pulling out quietly. Their perfect facade began to dissolve, one polite southern smile at a time. For years I had been the quiet sister, the peacemaker. I always kept the peace, always smoothed things over, always swallowed my own hurt to protect others from discomfort. But the truth? That wasn't kindness. It was self-erasure. By the end of that week, Eric's boss called him in for a character review meeting. In his field, reputation meant trust, and he had none left. The firm didn't fire him outright, but they demoted him to a minor role, with no client-facing duties. I didn't cheer or gloat. I simply watched. Calm, collected. Melissa retreated from social media altogether. Her spotless image now had cracks so deep no filter could hide them. A month later, I mailed the framed sketch he had tossed aside back to him, carefully wrapped with a handwritten note. "This was always yours to keep safe. You chose to let it rot." He never replied. For the first time in my life, I felt my power return. Not the power to control them, but the power to stand up for myself, to refuse silence, to take back the narrative they tried to steal. I poured myself into my art like never before. I hosted an exhibition downtown called Ghosts We Keep, a series of pieces about the parts of ourselves we lose to please others. The opening night was packed. Strangers and old friends alike stood in front of each painting, quiet and moved. Some pieces even sold out before the night was over. My work was featured in a local magazine. The interviewer asked, "What inspired this collection?" I smiled and simply said, "Family can teach you everything about love and about loss." I didn't mention Eric. I didn't need to. Weeks turned into months, and slowly the noise died down. Friends who once tiptoed around the subject stopped asking. My parents tried to reach out, but I kept the boundaries clear. Short replies, polite but firm. They could visit if they wanted, but on my terms in my world. Melissa and Eric quietly rescheduled their wedding, a smaller, muted affair. I didn't receive an invite. I didn't expect one, and for the first time, I didn't care. I travelled more, painted more, laughed louder. I started hiking alone on weekends, listening to the crunch of gravel under my boots and feeling every breath as a victory. I rebuilt my life without them, piece by piece, stroke by stroke. No more apologizing for taking up space, no more quiet self-sacrifice to protect egos that never protected me. People often think revenge means shouting in someone's face or burning bridges in a blaze of drama, but real revenge? It's soft, silent. It's waking up and realizing you don't think about them anymore. It's living so fully that their absence feels like freedom, not loss. I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I didn't fall apart. I just watched them watch me rise. He thought he broke me. He was wrong. After the whirlwind ended, I found myself standing alone in my quiet apartment in Seattle, staring out at the rain tapping against the windows. The chaos had settled. The angry calls had stopped. The guilt-laced messages from relatives had slowed to a trickle. In that new silence, I felt something unexpected. Peace. I started to rebuild my mornings, slow and gentle. Instead of waking up to notifications or tiptoeing around the possibility of family drama, I began each day with a simple ritual. A mug of dark roast coffee, a slice of sourdough toast with honey, and an hour spent painting whatever came to mind. No commissions, no deadlines, just me and the canvas. My agency offered me a promotion right before all this began, a creative director role I had once dreamed of but always turned down, afraid it might pull me away from family visits or obligations. This time, I said yes. Old skin. It felt like shedding an old skin. I designed new murals for local community centres, guided young artists through workshops on weekends, and finally took that solo road trip down the California coast I'd been putting off for years. I sat on hidden beaches, sketchbook in hand, listening to the crash of waves echoing in my chest. I adopted a rescue dog, a shaggy black mutt with soulful eyes. I named her Nova. She became my constant companion on long walks and late-night painting sessions, always ready to curl up beside me when the nights felt too big. Slowly, Seattle began to feel less like a place I ran to, and more like a place I chose. Eric and I haven't spoken since that last call. The few times he reached out afterward, I didn't answer. Not out of cruelty, but because I knew any conversation would be about managing his guilt, not healing our bond. Melissa faded into digital shadows, her once perfect online presence reduced to sporadic updates about yoga classes and brunch spots. I felt nothing when I saw them. No pang, no anger, just nothing. And that emptiness, it was freedom. I realized that for years I had mistaken self-sacrifice for love. I thought that staying silent, shrinking myself, constantly giving in, that was loyalty. But real love doesn't ask you to vanish. Real love doesn't erase your voice or turn you into a ghost in your own story. In losing them, I found myself. I learned to celebrate small things again. The smell of turpentine in my studio, the way Nova's tail thumps against the floor when I come home, the warmth of sunlight spilling across unfinished canvases. I stopped looking at family holidays with dread. Thanksgiving? I spent it hiking up Mount Rainier, sharing a thermos of cider with Nova at the summit, looking out over a world that felt endless and forgiving. Christmas? I decorated my tiny apartment with hand-painted ornaments, invited a few friends over, and laughed until my stomach hurt. Life, it turned out, was waiting for me all along. One evening, while cleaning out my closet, I found that old red ski jacket. I traced the seams with my fingertips and felt a small ache in my chest. Not of loss, but of gratitude. It reminded me of the girl who once believed she had to be small to be loved, and the woman who learned to stand tall, even if it meant standing alone. I folded it carefully, placed it back on the shelf, and shut the door softly. If I had to distill everything into one lesson, it would be this: never confuse being quiet with being weak. Silence doesn't always mean surrender. Sometimes it's a gathering of power. A silent storm building its force before the break. People will call you cold when you set boundaries. They will call you selfish when you refuse to shrink. Let them. You don't owe your life to anyone's comfort but your own. And if you, watching this or reading this, have ever felt small in a room full of people you thought were family, if you've ever swallowed your truth to keep the peace, I want you to know something. You're not alone. You are not too much. You are exactly enough. And you. In the end, I didn't win by tearing anyone down. I won by choosing myself. By walking away from a table where love had turned conditional, where loyalty had morphed into control. Now, I sleep through the night without jolting awake, wondering what I did wrong. I wake up excited to create, to explore, to love on my own terms. I stopped being the quiet sister, the silent supporter, the invisible safety net. I became the artist, the leader, the woman who finally, fully belonged to herself. I no longer look back. I don't revisit old texts or try to decode silent treatments or replay conversations in my head. The past is a country I no longer live in. I don't hate them. I don't love them the way I used to. I simply don't carry them anymore. And that's how I won. Not with rage, not with revenge shouted from rooftops, but with a quiet kind of freedom that no one can take away. Today, I stood on my balcony, Nova resting at my feet, a cup of coffee warming my hands. The sun rose slowly over Seattle, spilling light across the bay, painting the sky in colours even my most daring canvases had never captured. And today, I smiled, not because they lost, but because I found myself.